Hello, my name is David Brett. I'm the editor of the New Westminster Times, coming to you again from downtown Toronto at the Prospectors and Developers Association convention in the convention center behind me. You can see the CN Tower up above. I'm going to be sharing some updates from the PDAC, but first to the bombshell news that's still reverberating in Vancouver and throughout BC regarding the Canada-Musqueam Agreement that was announced some time ago, but it just sort of ended up in the news cycle, and now there's this mass confusion about what it really means. So the first thing we're going to do is delve into that. So yesterday, the New Westminster Times posted on its X feed a statement that I had received from a spokesperson with the Crown Indigenous Relations Department. And that statement did not help clarify the earlier news release. And then a further statement by the Minister Rebecca Alty, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, on her X feed further sort of muddied the waters even further. So one of the crucial issues in the situation with the Musqueams, this sweeping kind of general claim to their quote-unquote traditional territory, which takes in the entirety of Vancouver, a whole bunch of Howe Sound, the Fraser Valley, and just a massive area. And because the word title was included in the news release, people have assumed this is akin to the Cowichan announcement that suddenly private property interests are going to be conflicting with title once again, causing confusion. So what I'm going to do is step through this and break it down a little bit and do a bit of an analysis of what's being said. So the other thing that happened is that the actual agreements related to the announcements were not available anywhere online. And then the minister said, oh no, we're going to release it. And then Global News came out with something and it was there and then it disappeared. But finally, we've attained at least a part of the agreement, the pile of agreements, thanks to Drea Humphrey from Rebel News, who posted screenshots of it on her X account. So we printed those out, and I'm going to be reading from some of those pages in a moment. But first to what Minister Alty said about what is sort of percolating out there in social media. She said in her, and this is from her X account, it's a statement from Minister Alty. The recently signed Musqueam agreements do not affect private property. Suggestions otherwise are false. Are they? Are they false, really? I'll make a comment on that, but I don't really think so. And then she goes on to say, under this agreement, Canada and Musqueam have created a path forward to negotiate Musqueam's rights and title rather than pursuing litigation in the courts. So it's all about, well, we've rushed this out there and kind of done this backroom secret deal to avoid litigation. But are they really going to be avoiding litigation? And then there was a statement by Mr. Pascal Laplante that we published yesterday with similar kind of language in it. They call it the Incremental Recognition Agreement, provides general recognition that Musqueam has Aboriginal rights and title within their territory and establishes a framework for ongoing discussions and future negotiations to define how and where, the where is super important here, those rights and title could apply. But then it goes on and with the same kind of talking points. In other words, it's partnership and negotiations, respectful dialogue, and not through litigation. So this whole thing is being justified as like, well, let's avoid litigation because look what happened with Cowichan. That didn't work out. That's kind of the subtext here that they're not talking about. So, two key points that they're contending in their communications, and let's face it, this has been a communications debacle of spectacular proportions. They come out with a news release that takes everyone by surprise, has sweeping generalizations in it, with no detail behind it, or no spokesperson available to discuss it. Okay, now to the agreement itself. Keeping in mind, they're saying, oh, this isn't about title. So, from part 2, I'll just read a few sections. It says, purpose. The purpose of this purposes of this agreement are to A, recognize Musqueam's rights and title within the Musqueam territory. And then just a few paragraphs later, part 3, fundamental principles. First fundamental principle, A, Musqueam has rights and title within the Musqueam territory. So right off the bat, the agreement itself seems to contradict the statements by the minister and Mr. LaPlante. So now, in a strictly technical sense, the document does not confer title in the way that the court awarded Aboriginal title in the Cowichan case. The court effectively declared a number of private property interests invalid and defective. And then it declared that under certain private property that there was a coexisting Aboriginal title. So this coexisting Aboriginal title, as we're now seeing, is having a ripple effect across the entire province of BC, and the impacts are going to be felt across Canada. So, while the agreement does not automatically confer title, it recognizes title. It just doesn't say where they're recognizing it, but it appears to be tantamount to declaring title somewhere at some time. It would be kind of like saying the Musqueam have Aboriginal rights and title to the Dunbar neighborhood of Vancouver. Well, everyone in that neighborhood would think, well, is it my house? Is it the school? Or is it the park? Or is it where? And when? But the agreement seems to set out it's like it says, it's a path forward. In other words, the machinery is now in place and locked and loaded to roll forward to the point where they're going to declare title in some places. So while it doesn't instantaneously enact title, it sets up a framework for doing it. They call it an implementation agreement. We'll talk about that a little more. Here we've recognized the title, now we're going to implement it. Well, how in the world are they going to do that? How are they going to implement it? Now, in the definition section, just so no one's confused, it says, by rights and title, it means the existing Aboriginal and treaty rights recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982, and for greater certainty, includes Aboriginal title and self-government rights. So when they say rights and title, they mean the exact same type of rights and title that were engaged in the Cowichan case, which had a direct impact on private property. So the ministry is saying, no, it doesn't affect private property, and that's any suggestions to that effect are false. I don't think it's false to suggest that it will have an impact on private property is false. According to the agreement, it's true. Not instantaneously. It's like saying, well, we're going to foreclose on your property at some point. They just don't know when exactly. So, now as to this claim that, well, we're just putting this agreement in place to avoid costly litigation and this adversarial approach and so on and so forth, that claim also rings hollow in light of the wording that's in the actual agreement. So the agreement sets out like a 3 or 4 stage process of negotiation. First, it's like very informal. Okay, hey, we're going to sit down and, well, what about this right and what about this title? And then if they can't agree at the informal stage, then they go to a mediation process. Oh, that's a little more serious. Like a hammer is going to come down and the government's hand will be forced. Now, if they can't get through the mediation stage, they go to stage 3. Well, guess what stage 3 involves? So I'll just read it to you. Where stage 2 is terminates under section da-da-da, the dispute may proceed to stage 3 for resolution as follows. The parties may agree to refer the dispute to arbitration for final and binding resolution, da-da-dum, or, importantly, where the parties do not agree to refer the dispute to arbitration in accordance with section da-da-da within 60 days of the termination of stage 2, either party may commence litigation to resolve this dispute. Let me read that again. If they can't get what they want, if the Musqueam are not satisfied with what Canada is offering, they go to the courts anyway. So the suggestion that this agreement is avoiding litigation is not true. Litigation is directly referenced. If they can't come to an agreement, back to court they go. Well, saying, oh, well, at least we're negotiating. Well, that's what happened in the Cowichan case as well. There were negotiations, and the judge in that case lays it out, says, well, the negotiations didn't work out, so here we are in court. Now, I think everyone can agree that's not a great idea. Now, then the question is, what about these implementation agreements? So, unfortunately, those implementation agreements, I can't get my hands on them, and it seems like no one in the country can get their hands on them. But there's one page here that Drea thankfully put on her social media feed. There's 3 implementation agreements that are talked about here. A, there's a revenue sharing agreement with respect to YVR. I guess it sounds like it's an update to their old one. And then B, there's what they call Stewardship and Marine Management Agreement entered into between Musqueam and Canada. And then there's the Ministry of Fisheries and da-da-da. So what exactly does that mean? Unclear at this point. It sounds like Vancouver is one of the largest ports in the world. It's a port city. So are we handing control of the ports to the Musqueam? What are we doing here? Unclear. And then there's a third one, fisheries agreement between Musqueam and Canada. Fisheries agreement. So the specifics of this spelled out in the agreements, which maybe at some point the government will allow the public to see. So that's the agreement. Now, just to a general comment on what this all means. I have to say, being here in Toronto at the world's premier mining conference, a lot of Canadian government of Canada representatives here. I have to say, I'm not encouraged. There seems to be a huge disconnect between what I would call the bureaucratic class of civil servants and the political class, that is the dominant force here in Eastern Canada, are completely in a bubble, in a world unto their own, thinking about these matters in a way entirely disconnected to the way the public, the voters and the taxpayers are thinking about this. To them, this is like a moral imperative. The most long-winded land acknowledgements I've ever heard have been heard at this mining conference. They go on and on. The panels, the Aboriginal panels and discussions, they have, Government of Canada officials, and they're talking about reconciliation, and they're talking about basically a path to fulfilling what they believe in their minds is what is just. They don't seem to connect any credence whatsoever to any public backlash. In other words, they're just disregarding the public's feedback. They don't care. Now, I would even go beyond that. It's not simply that they don't care. They are unaware. I was shocked at the level of ignorance of the government officials here in Toronto. They hadn't even heard of the Musqueam case. They don't know what the Musqueam is. So, here in Ontario, I'm from Vancouver area, from BC. I don't know all the First Nations in Ontario, or I tend to be aware of what's happening in my own part of the world. However, these are government officials. Vancouver's a massive metropolis. How could they not know? I spoke to a senior official with the Crown Indigenous Relations Ministry. Said, hey, I was wondering if you could give me some information about this Musqueam decision. Completely unaware of what I was talking about. So that's a big problem. We have a kind of woke mindset that is so hardwired into the system. It's as if any opposition to the rolling out of these agreements and the proceeding forward, moving forward, as I say, negotiating, moving forward, is seen as either A, racism, colonialism, right-wing extremism. So it's unfortunate that we're in this position. So I guess that's the update regarding the PDAC today. This is an international conference. Countries from around the world are looking to attract investment from these huge multinational mining companies and the junior mining sector. They want the capital to flow out of Bay Street, which is just over the way and behind those buildings from me. That's where all the money is. They want the money into their country. They don't want it to stay here in Canada. So all the Canadian governments are touting mining as this kind of holy grail to deliver us out of every problem imaginable, the Trump tariffs, the kind of way we're kind of boxed in by America. We have Mark Carney, he's not at this conference, he's over in India talking about critical minerals and supplying critical minerals, and there was a big deal signed apparently with Cameco to supply uranium. However, all of these projects, all of the critical minerals, copper, nickel, tungsten, all these metals are required for the greenification of the world, require capital, both to find the metals and to extract them to build. So that's the other stream here at this conference. The companies are super frustrated. They're trying to get permits, and all the governments are clamoring, like Doug Ford or David Eby. They're all promising all the companies to speed up, to kind of fast track and streamline these regulatory processes so that the mines can get into production faster. I heard someone say yesterday, who's a gentleman who's involved in building a major mine here in Ontario, he says, oh, every time they say streamline, I get nervous because it means it's slower. The streamlining processes are like, oh no, all the people I've already been talking to and actually understand what I'm talking about, now I've got a whole group of new people. What's happening in the government bureaucracy is this constant duplication. They're not sharing knowledge. They're highly siloed institutions where the companies are just sighing in frustration because they have to explain the same thing to the same people. Just share one example where someone said that they would explain something to do with the effluent from their proposed mine in the environmental assessment process. And then, okay, excellent. They would submit, take 2 years to get that sorted out, and then they have to apply for permits. So the environmental assessment is different from getting the permits. So they would just turn over to the permit people, and they say, okay, explain it all again. So all of the documents, all of the explanations, it's like, it's even the same people. She said it's the same people, but they want it re-explained to them from a permitting lens. So you have that normal bureaucratic bungling and incompetent management that comes with government, not just here, but let's face it, it's a universal problem. But now we have the Indigenous wedge coming into it. They're saying, well, we want to co-manage. We want to review everything that you're doing. We want to be involved. Well, that's a massive education process. This is just going to pour glue into the works and slow everything down. But everyone here is very polite and very kind, and they won't say anything untoward because they know they'll be canceled, and they'll if they in any way offend the First Nation or multiple First Nations they're working with, their project could be canceled. It's deadly. It's like they're walking a tightrope constantly. So that's what's happening here at PDAC. I mean, there is much excitement about mining, and one of the themes that keeps coming out here is that the world needs metals. And there seems to be finally a recognition that metals are required here. So the Musqueam debacle, if you will, this communications fumble, connects into mining because it's just part of the larger narrative of the way in which we manage and relate ourselves to First Nations. It's like kid gloves, eggshells, everyone's scared to death to say the wrong thing. And the government just doesn't want to take a position. So we'll see what happens with the Musqueam decision, but the feedback is that what they're saying, their statements, their public assurances are not really worth the paper they're not written on. They're not reassuring anyone with their kind of don't worry about it pronouncements. They have to be much more forthcoming about what's going on. They have to delve into the details, just like I've just done. Well, what if you disagree? What about the litigation avenues? What about where exactly? And I'll just finally say this about the Musqueam situation. It's as if the government is assuming the public is stupid. That we're The public is too dumb to figure this out. Everyone in BC knows, and now in the whole country, that the Cowichan case is evidence that the declaration of Aboriginal title conflicts with private property. The Musqueam Agreement is like there's a train car behind me. It's like they've started the train. The train is running down the tracks, and the first stop is Aboriginal title. It's right in the agreement. This is point one of the purpose of the agreement. Everyone can see what's coming. This kind of wordsmithing of these announcements, very badly handled. Maybe they'll do better, but maybe they should just come out and talk to the media. And this is finally, I'll say, will anyone in the mainstream media take them on this? Who's going to come out and really grill them and hold their feet to the fire? Maybe this is a moment for the mainstream media to figure it out. Say, hey, get aggressive, ask some hard questions, push some people in to answer and fess up and disclose what's being hidden. It feels like it's a cover-up, it's a cloak and dagger. The public and the media and academics and people who are following this issue should not have to, hire private detectives to find the agreement. Anyway, I thank you for watching. My name is David Brett. I'm the editor of the New Westminster Times. And if you like our reporting and what we're doing, I would invite you to support our work on our website, newwesttimes.com. Up in the right-hand corner, there's a button that says support our work. If you would feel so inclined, we would really appreciate it. We do have costs. So I thank you again for watching.